Welcome to the 359. I'm Ben Fox-Rubin.
And I'm Dan Ackerman.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg sat down for his first congressional hearings on Tuesday to respond to the Cambridge Analytica breach, perhaps the biggest scandal his 14-year-old company has ever faced. But after getting grilled for over 4 hours, he seemed to come out largely unscathed, and Facebook stock jumped 4.5%. Dan, how do you think he did?
You know, it's kind of like he dodged some bullets because the people asking the questions didn't really know how to get around behind him and really get him with the gotcha questions. But at the same time, his robotic nature and the fact that he looked so uncomfortable up there, and how could someone with so much money look so uncomfortable in a suit is beyond me.
Well, he is used to wearing a T-shirt.
Yeah,
That's true.
It's a bit of a draw. That suit.
You think he looked uncomfortable, though? I think that a lot of everybody's impressions are different, but I think a lot of people saw this as Zuckerberg outpaced expectations. He looked poised. He was very media trained. He was on point. This wasn't the Mark Zuckerberg from years past where he was flap sweating on camera. It was certainly a much more poised situation than previously.
He just had to outlast all these questioners without saying anything radical or divisive, and he largely did that. I said last night after seeing everyone kind of go off about this all day long, I said, this is an unpopular opinion. I said on Twitter, but I could not be less interested in watching all these hours and hours of Zuckerberg testimony because the senators and staff don't know enough to ask the right questions, and Zuck is so heavily media trained so as to avoid saying anything remotely interesting.
Okay. I mean, look, I would largely agree with that, actually. But let's talk about what could actually change. And let's start with regulation. So Zuckerberg at least opened the door to the idea that, look, I'm willing to work with you guys on new regulation. The problem is that you and I both know that Congress has a very hard time getting even basic things done. So what's your expectation that would actually happen?
Yeah, even basic things about technology. And I think he has to go up there and he has to appear open. You certainly can't go up there and appear closed off to it and say, no, that's it, we're not going to do this, because then everyone would turn on him and would rush something ridiculous through that wouldn't accomplish anything.
So in that way, he did do the right thing.
He's playing ball, but he also knows they're probably not going to get it together in any meaningful sense. And of course, it goes against the entire ethos of the governing party to want to regulate a private business. So he has that on his side as well.
So let's also talk about what Facebook as a company hopes to do. Zuckerberg talked about the idea that they're going to do a lot more self-regulating in that they're going to police themselves much more. They're going to be much more proactive. They said, we're having this big philosophical shift at the company. And do you actually believe that's going to be the case, and in years to come, this is going to be a different looking Facebook?
I mean, there's two big issues or two big problems they have to confront. Number one is they're not doing anything that's really all that radically different from a lot of other companies that mine a certain amount of data about you. And secondly, they have to come to grips with the fact that you and I and the senators may care about all this. But I've talked to a lot of just regular Facebook users, and they're not that concerned about it. Mm-hmm. They don't have the same expectation of privacy that you and I do, rightly or wrongly, just as in years past they would use Gmail and they wouldn't be concerned that Google was scanning their emails and giving them contextual ads based on the content of their emails. Like, that horrified me. Regular folks would be like, all right.
I kind of expected them to do it. So I wanted to end with one more question. There's kind of this broad consensus that, or there's this argument that like maybe Facebook should start getting you to pay subscriptions for getting an ad-free service. Do you think that would work? Would you sign up for it? Do you think that would ever actually even
It's
happen?
so interesting, a premium model. There are some social networks and services that we all use that have premium models that you can trade up to. I'm not sure they would get enough from a subscription to offset what they would lose in terms of the data, because I think their larger subset of data is the massive conglomeration of all this information is what's really valuable to them. So I doubt you could ever fully opt out, no matter what you paid them.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. If you want to read more about these stories, check us out on CNET. I'm Ben Fox-Rubin.
And I'm Dan Ackerman.
Thanks for listening.
So it's pretty quiet in the chat today. I think people are tired of hearing about Zuckerberg, to be frank.
I'm really not that surprised, but this was the big thing, and It got an enormous amount of attention, much more than a lot of other congressional hearings. This was the story du jour yesterday, so we would be remiss if we didn't talk about it.
We do have one good question starting out from Srinjoy. He says, what do you think of the extra seat cushion that Zuckerberg had to sit on to make himself look big?
I think, look, if I was...
It's pretty standard. I mean...
If I was going to sit there for 4 hours, I would have liked to have a giant seat cushion to sit on, too. So.
I mean, I sit for a lot of TV interviews with anchors and reporters, and every time they have me and the other person there, and they size us up, and they figure out whose chair is going to be higher and lower and how to make everything look even. You know, he's not a tall guy, and he's also sitting lower down in the room than all the set. They're deliberately up above him, and... I call no foul on that.
Okay. It just seems odd if he was sitting next to somebody, they want to even him out, especially for the sake of the camera angles and whatnot. But for him to sit alone on this cushion, which doesn't look comfortable, it looks like he's having to lean out of it.
We'd have to see what other people who have been in that room at that desk have done, if this is the only cushioning that we've seen or if it is a common practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as we said yesterday, too, you know, he was so media trained that there wasn't really a very high expectation that there was going to be this big, oh my God moment where he was going to accidentally flop.
Well,
you know.
let me say, he was media trained in that he played it close to the vest and he just answered questions in a simple manner and he made sure not to show his cards. He wasn't media trained in the sense that he was convivial and chatty and conversational
casual, yeah.
and got people to embrace him as a personality. He was, dare I say, his normal robotic self.
I felt like he was less robotic than usual, but, you know, he was also, like you said, he was just very clipped responses. So.
AI is making great strides. We're moving towards that uncanny valley.
And
he's close to passing the Turing test. He's not quite there yet, but he's getting there.
He just wants to learn to love.
What is this thing you humans call a kiss?
Good grief.
I wish we could get away with it without getting our butt suit off, but right before we started the podcast, Dan was sitting here monologuing from the screenplay for Blade Runner.
Oh, he was doing a good
And it was
job.
so perfect that...
we could do a bit of that.
Oh, no, we can't.
I'm just quoting from a movie. I'm doing a couple of movie quotes.
It's still
Don't
intellectual
even bother.
property.
Don't even bother. It's not worth it.
Just use your imagination. Dan's soothing voice.
Zuckerberg sitting in front of a questioner, looking into a little box, and the guy's on the other side smoking. And he says, Zuck, see a tortoise lying on its back, its belly baking in the sun.
We're getting sued as we speak.
All right, so let's talk about...
You're not helping Zuck. Why aren't you helping it?
Dread Headlocks, awesome name. Is this just a dog and pony show, or are they actually going to ask him some serious questions into what security was leaked? Now, it sounds like they're actually in the midst of that right now as we are sitting here chatting. At least it seemed like it was heading that direction when I departed the hearing this morning.
I wish I had mentioned this earlier. As I was coming to the podcast, Alfred Ng, who's watching the whole thing unfold now, told me that Zuckerberg was, in fact, part of the 87 million who had their data breached as part of the Cambridge Analytica breach.
And I was not.
Neither was I.
Excellent.
We both checked up on it, but I guess Mark or somebody Mark knows did that silly quiz that resulted in this whole situation.
But let's not use the word breach too strongly here. What information exactly was shared? From my understanding, some of it is just the very public information you have on your public-facing Facebook page. It just got scraped. It wasn't anything, hidden behind your personal, friends-only firewall. It was like, your name and your hometown. It depends on what you allow people to see. So calling this a breach, I think, is still a strong word. It's an inappropriate use of data that was collected.
Like data misuse. That's true.
A missharing, but this wasn't a hack in any way. This was no, a breach indicates that there was some security that was circumvented.
Yeah.
And the only circumventing really happened against Facebook's rules is that somebody who got all this information and data and got it according to Facebook's rules and turned around and shared it with a third party, they were not supposed to. So that's not really a breach. That's a misuse of information that you got from Facebook by a third party.
Hidden Fox, sorry, what?
I was just saying, good point. Go for it.
Yeah. Hidden Fox largely agrees.
Is that your cousin? Ben Fox and Hidden Fox?
and Hidden Fox.
Hidden Fox, yeah.
They say
nice,
that-
nice to hear from you, Hidden Fox.
They felt that the environment was too jovial to be taken seriously and that he seemed to get off really, really easy.
Yeah, that
Now-
seemed to be the general impression.
To contrast that, Michael Brown was saying that I appreciate the fact that Mark Zuckerberg is taking full responsibility for this. However, I never thought their business model was really a good idea, monetizing people's personal thoughts, basically. I want to
But that's
just...
everybody.
we
that's
monetize
every business
everything.
model.
Folks. Yeah, that's true. I think the thing is that, Zuckerberg definitely made an admission of guilt. He said the buck stops here. This is my company. I take the blame for this type of situation. The problem is, and I've seen this reported on before, is that they've made a lot of mistakes, and he's done apology tours in the past, and he's apologized plenty of times in the past. So the question is, what's actually going to change? Because there have been these dust-ups previously about your privacy settings are too confusing or too Byzantine. They make small tweaks on the side. They don't really change a lot. So I think people would be right to be skeptical that anything is going to change.
They change it too much, and that once you figure out where all the privacy and security settings are on Facebook, when you go back later, they've changed it all around.
They reconfigure
and then you have to relearn it, and that's really the issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, to broaden it out, looking at a lot of the Google Chrome settings, just how a lot of that stuff is set up and how you reduce the types of ad targeting and cookies, they could do a better job of making that a little bit clearer.
Sure, but you could also do the same thing with your Google account, with a lot of other things. You could click on that little blue triangle in any of the 5 million banner ads you see every day and go to that ad choices page where you can opt out of all these ad networks. So it's not just Facebook that's tracking you all over the place. It's all these ad networks, and it's Google. Right. And other people.
Which is ultimately why I think it's a good conversation that we're all having, as far as this is what happens when your privacy does get, utilized in these misuses. So it is good that we're talking about
I don't want to appear to be pro Facebook or pro big company, but what do people expect when they go into these sharing platforms and they share and they're using the platform for free and they know that it's ad and marketing supported? I think people sometimes have an unrealistic expectation that they get all these goods and services for free, and there's no trade-off there.
Yeah.
I just want
Also, quick shout-out, Hidden Fox, you're a great Metal Gear Solid.
I just want to include a sentiment somewhat agreeing with Michael Brown's earlier statement, in that I was legitimately impressed with how well put together Zuckerberg was. I thought he was very well handled. I know I'm not alone in that opinion. But I do still see fear in his eyes. I know a lot of people say he's been truly poised, but I think what it really comes down to is he is taking it quite personally, and I think that's endearing in this case. And the flop sweat is there. It's just well masked by the TV makeup I'm sure he's wearing.
Yeah.
He's got that look in his eyes.
Yeah. Look, the problem is what are they actually going to do to him? What would regulation look like? It's one thing to say, are you for regulation? And then
regulation
he says,
of what, though?
And then he says, yes, for the right regulation.
Or
who wouldn't say that?
The complaints of, your terms of service are too confusing. How is that different from every other terms of service you ever click through from Apple or Microsoft or Sony or Google or anybody else? It's not really.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I find Facebook's material now is much more open and easy to read than most other people's because they've been called on the carpet so many times for it. We did a TV news piece not that long ago where we went through a lot of the terms of service and things on Facebook, and frankly, the layout and the way they explain things and the way they cut things up was much better than I've seen from almost anyone else, at least in the most recent version. I'm not in the past, sure, total mess.
Hidden Fox still thinks that the Senate's dropping the ball. When Zuck was asked about people departing Facebook and taking their account offline and all that, he was critical of that no one in the Senate followed up with, but do you destroy their information or do you still keep that about them? Are there any other major details you think that they've completely glassed over in this proceeding?
Now, that's Facebook's fault because they muddy this issue a lot. When they say, you're going to leave Facebook? All right, click this button to suspend your account. And that just kind of hides it but keeps everything there. And then if you want to actually delete it, that's a whole nother process you have to go through. And even then they say, we're not going to erase your data for a certain amount. It's going to take a while to pull all your stuff down. Although I think he did answer one question and say that once they actually do that, they can't recreate it.
Got it. But at that point, somebody else probably already has it.
But that to a certain extent sounds like there is a value to the user in doing that, though. In that, let's say you wanted to suspend your account, you wanted to take a digital break from this or something. Maybe they shouldn't make it so easy to delete it entirely.
They don't.
They
make it easy
right.
to suspend. They make it hard because people always say, "That's it, I'm quitting Facebook," and then they click that button,
and then they
come back a month later. They go, "Oh, all right, I guess I can bring it all back," and they're back to where they were.
Right.
Let me just say, all of this is why over the years I've always kept my MySpace page.
I need to go validate this now. Is that true?
It's probably somewhere.
Unfortunately, I don't think any of this benefits that one social media company, Ello. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, man.
Ello was like
the
the
other one?
anti-Facebook.
Was Peach the other one?
Peach. Peach
Plum?
died quickly.
Yeah.
I think
So did
Ello is
Ello.
still around.
I still get emails from them.
Friendster.
I'm like, I've got that?
Google Plus.
Yeah.
Google Plus is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Google Plus exists, but more than
That
Peach
is
or
their
Ello,
that is their slogan.
we exist. We exist.
That's it. We're all switching to Discord.
But yeah, that's the problem is like what exactly is the alternative? For the time being, it seems that there's no upstart that's really going to take out Facebook. And
There are plenty of
even if there
alternatives,
were-
though.
There are alternatives, but it's not where everybody
like talking
is.
to your family? That's a terrible idea.
No, but I mean, we all know, I don't need to list them, but they are different experiences, and I think that's largely why this has become such a sought-after proceeding. I mean, people are interested in it because, above all else, as being reiterated in the chat right now, Facebook seems to be more personal than a lot of the other places. You could argue Instagram, but Twitter, Snapchat, that seems to be a little more commercialized, a little more fleeting. Facebook being so personal gets a lot of passion out of people. It feels like it's truly an invasion of your privacy. And that's, I know, a redundant statement, but it feels more like somebody came into your home.
That makes a lot of sense to me because it is, in many ways, Facebook does encourage you to share a lot of your own personal life, and it is kind of like your personal blog. Like this is,
in a sense,
this
it's
is
a
an
peer-to-peer
accounting-
network because everyone you're connected with is a friend or a peer, unlike Instagram or Twitter where you're just projecting out to anonymous people who follow you.
Right. And that's why maybe it's discomforting for people to be reminded that there's this giant gorilla in the middle of this whole social network that's pulling all your information and packaging it for advertisers and sometimes completely misusing your data. And that is certainly something that everybody needs to be reminded of. And hopefully Facebook does actually change some of those things. I mean,
But what would
like
they
you said,
change?
he's chastened by this. Maybe they are actually going to do something.
Other than what they already did, which is change the rules for how third parties who collect information can use it and can share it with other people. That's the main thing. I don't think they're planning on changing anything about what they store and collect and what they sell. The only real changes they've talked about are making sure that no one gets some of that information and then resells it. The repackaging and reselling, maybe, not just because it's potentially a violation of your privacy, but also because somebody's making money off that data and they're not getting their cut.
Yeah. And the midterms are going to be a good testing ground.
No
for sure.
votes in the midterms will be decided by anyone's opinion on Facebook.
I don't know.
There you go.
See.
I'm calling it right now.
We'll see about that.
That is not going to be a driving issue for people.
Continuing on with the whole personal sentiment, a number of people in the chat cite that people don't fully understand how Facebook works, and maybe from Chris Garner that people should realize that if you don't want your information shared, maybe don't create an account. People do opt into this to a certain extent, and
Completely opt in. It's 100% opt in.
Okay, all right.
You make an account.
How much truly is on Facebook as a fault?
They have. I would. It's a great question, but I would say that they haven't done enough to police their own platform. And Zuckerberg said just as much yesterday. He said that what we would do is create tools and just expect people to use them for good. Now we're having this philosophical shift and saying we're going to create tools and then make sure people are using them for the right reasons, as opposed to, hate speech, Russian trolls, election meddling, all that other stuff.
Yes, shutting down that stuff I think is much more important than, trying to let people know that they're letting advertisers know what their hometown is and what pages, what band fan pages they like.
I like Ween.
Man, I've gotten pro Facebook. I can't believe it.
Yeah,
it's not
I
really
know.
what I.
It's actually
it's not
pretty-
really how I feel. But at the same time, people
good argument.
people whining that they're getting exactly what they signed up for doesn't hold a lot of water with me.
Fair enough. That's a good point. Expanding on that, from Huey Yegg, isn't this about a much larger problem, ethics in the corporate world? Seems that Facebook and tech giants aren't alone in this. Now, that's another really great point, and I don't know. I don't have the chops to speak on that. Ben, maybe you do with living in the Amazon world.
I could probably talk about it broadly in the tech world because like tech is definitely the space that I exist in, but the misuse of data and the complete lack of regulation around data, particularly in the United States, is something that I think is a conversation that we all really do need to be having, especially with the EU passing new regulations with the GDPR that's going to go into effect next month. That's I'm sure a lot of U.S. citizens are looking at that and saying, gee, I wish our government did something similar.
But that's a real restriction, just like that right to be forgotten in Europe, where if you go to Google there in a European country, you're not going to get the same results that you get here because people have, frankly, often fairly ridiculous reasons for requesting redactions, and we would not allow that here because that would be a prior restraint on publication, basically. And
Right. Or yeah, it could even be viewed as infringing.
Right, you're right to know is all. We always consider the larger public good of free exchange of information to be more important than an individual's right to hide something embarrassing or negative about themselves. In Europe, they feel differently, and they don't have the same baked-in constitutional protections that put that right paramount above all others.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think with the GDPR, a lot of folks view it as a positive in that it has stricter regulations on how you collect data as a tech company and how that data is stored and disseminated. That's something that's broadly, it seems, lacking in
But
the
anyone
US.
who's looked at how Europe as a whole, the European Union, has regulated various industries knows that they are terrible at it. And their answer is always more regulation that strangles, businesses for ridiculous reasons. Because a guy, an EU legislator in one country can't understand what's happening in an industry in another country, and that's one of the reasons why people scratch their heads and said, "I can't believe the Brexit people won." A lot of that was because people were afraid of this overreaching European Union regulatory thrust.
I like this
farmers
version.
in the UK.
I like this version of Dan Ackerman.
We're taking orders from other countries about what to do with their cows.
Pro-business Dan Ackerman.
Oh, man.
It's a very enjoyable Dan Ackerman to listen
Who knew?
to. Who knew?
So there's a few requests for us to commentate on some more of the political issues of
try.
these hearings, and it's
Yeah.
not really our forte, but we
That's
can
my forte.
We can try.
We'll try not to get too political, but from Joseph Del Mundo, do you guys find the breakdown of the countries that were affected by the Cambridge Analytica scandal interesting? I am mostly interested in how the Philippines was the close second in the breakdown. Now, I have absolutely zero perspective on that, but maybe you guys do.
I can't say that I know much about that.
I mean, my understanding is just based on who took that quiz and who their friends were who were linked to it, because it went 1 degree of separation down. So that might just be who got served that quiz and took it. But beyond that, I do not know.
Thanks for trying. Lost Legacy. Do you think anyone from Facebook's going to get fired for this?
Oh, that's a great question.
It's
Good
a classic.
question, Lost Legacy. Zuckerberg's been asked this a few times. Apparently, nobody's been fired yet. In some cases, a firing would be an even broader admission of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And
who would be fired, and what would they have done to deserve that? Because their case has always been, and frankly, if you look at it, they're not entirely wrong. They operated under their own guidelines, and it's a third party who then misused this information
After
and
they
disseminated
already
it,
acquired
and they
it.
had no control over that. And you could say, well, they shouldn't have let it get to that point anyway where someone had the ability to do that, and that's true, but they were still operating within their own guidelines. So anyone who worked on that would not have been violating a company policy as far as we can tell right now.
That's a good point.
From Michael Brown, I thought the interview was very monumental in the tech industry. When Facebook makes its changes, do you think people will still enjoy it? Have we theorized about any of the changes that could come beyond the most recent policy change about ad sharing?
I think that their efforts to clean up some of the bad actors, like the hate speech, like the election meddling, like the
Sharing
like the
fake
phony
stories,
the fake
people
news.
gaming the system to get things to the top of people's news feeds.
Yeah,
that's a major thing.
I don't know. So answering Michael's question, I don't know that anybody's going to particularly miss that stuff because it's gaming the system, and maybe
the system
some
is already
people-
broken now. Everyone's
Right.
complaining about their new emphasis on things that your friends interact with or like or comment on. Means every time you go to Facebook, the same story is at the top of your news feed because people keep commenting on it or liking it because they see it.
I have noticed that.
And that then it's because it's at the top, more people do it, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that stays like the top post for like 2 days at a time. So clearly, there's more tweaking they have to do.
Yeah, and they're constantly trying to do that just to make sure that you continue to engage,
Yes.
read stuff.
It's making
click
it
on
a more
things.
boring experience, though, because you see the same thing if you go back later in the day at the top of your feed, and that seems like a mistake. And I think they're aware of that, and I'm sure they're working on tweaking that.
Yeah, and in the meantime, we'll see how much any of this has really impacted their user growth, their monthly active users, their daily active users.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, from what you said before, it wouldn't surprise me that the impact will not be that significant.
None
because
of it
as
will
much
matter.
As we talk about this, the broader public is probably aware of Cambridge Analytica.
No.
You don't think so at all?
The broader public can't name the vice president.
That's Joe Biden.
No, the broader public is not aware. If you did a man on the street survey and you said, "What is
About
Cambridge
Cambridge
Analytica?"
Analytica? I would love to do
three
that.
three out of 20 would be able to give you the correct answer. Maybe 5 or 6 out of 20 would even say they heard of the name.
Well, in that regard, if you are right, and I feel like that would be unfortunate if that were true, I congratulate our YouTube listeners for being so well informed.
Self-selecting group of very smart people who know quality podcast news and entertainment when they hear it.
All right, we have just enough time for a couple more quickies. From Michael Brown, what do you guys think the difference between the data that gets collected by Google, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit? Do we know exactly how much each of these can collect, where they pull from,
Yeah.
where it goes to?
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal had a good graphic on this yesterday that, Michael, you should definitely check out. It basically shows that Facebook has a tendency to collect more data and more kinds of data, but they all collect data to a certain extent. But if you're looking at it from a level of egregiousness or just the amount of specificity that they do acquire, Facebook does tend to be on more of the extreme. Plus, people do share more of their lives and their information on Facebook as opposed to on Google or with Twitter. I mean, like,
Although
Twitter doesn't
Google
know what
does-
high school I
yeah.
went to.
But Google does collect a tremendous amount of information and build a profile of you that
Relating
you
to
can go
search.
and see.
Right.
And that can follow you from website to website and serve you a lot of contextual ads.
And it is pretty scary or surprising to find out how much they're able to profile people relating to their search. And they also, as you said, they scrape Gmail accounts. So it's something that it would be really, really hard to get away from these things, to not have so much of your data scraped. I'm sure a lot of people have tried to do that kind of thing, but these companies are really critical in people's lives a lot of the time. So it's hard to do it.
So bringing out our fine-tooth combs, Chris Garner asked, does the Facebook term specify what they have the right to take as far as information goes and however they want to use it? How detailed are the terms of service?
They are very detailed. I'd have to try to look them up right now, but there was a very good series of pages that they have that are color-coded and have basically little jump links in between them, and you can follow this whole path of what they collect and how they use it. I don't know how if they list everything specifically in there, but having looked at them very recently for a TV segment, I thought they deserved a little bit of credit for that.
Let me draw your attention to Exhibit A from yesterday's hearing. I don't know which senator that is or who that is making the savage statement as it was, but I thought that was pretty solid roundup to encapsulate.
Yeah. I just don't think it's any worse than anybody else's. I thought that was a get my face on the news pre-planned quote there.
I mean, that's the attitude you've kind of taken about most of this.
I just think they're bad, but so is everybody else.
Fair enough. Okay, we are out of time, I think. We have really gone in deep on this, and I'm tired of hearing his name. So
Here you go. Here it is. Data policy. Right here on...
Am I
And
really?
you can scroll through that.
Am I really doing this?
I don't know.
Quality TV.
Really well laid out. And each one of these has a subcategory to it. So credit to Facebook for having a clear layout of their data policy.
I mean,
It's even easier to read on the web version.
It would be interesting to see how many people actually
Oh.
read any of that.
I had to go find it to do this TV news segment. So, no, I had to go dig for it. But the layout and the was good, and it was written in plain English. So, a tiny bit of credit for that.
So-
a tiny bit.
I mean,
Either
evil
way-
geniuses don't dominate the world by accident.
Yeah. And robots. We'll see if we do more Facebook tomorrow. We'll see what ends up happening, but there are hearings going on today, so
Yeah, we
maybe
know.
something else in tech will happen, but we don't know.
It's the first time I've ever said this. I hope they drop like a new iPhone or something like that because I just want to get distracted.
We need something else.
Yeah, but on that note, we are out of time. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Zucky McZuckerson. And we'll be back tomorrow with more.
Yeah.
Hopefully not Facebook.
But yeah, thanks everybody for all your questions. Hopefully we were able to answer all of them reasonably well. The 359 podcast is available on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, FeedBurner, Google Play Music, the Amazon Echo, and of course, CNET.com. Dan, thank you again, and we'll see you all again tomorrow.
Take care.
They're just questions, Ben. In answer to your query, they're written down for me. It's a test designed to provoke an emotional response.